In today's video, What Makes Coaching Work? Featuring Laura Lipton. Hello, coaches! Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Quick Tips. My name is Kim Cafino, and I've worked with hundreds of teachers, coaches, and leaders in schools around the world to help them create thriving and sustainable instructional coaching programs. And I'm on a mission to help you coach better. Wherever you are in your coaching journey, we can support you. Come learn with us in one of our courses for instructional coaches or private mentoring packages. Join our global Coach Better community and find all of our resources for instructional coaches on our website at coachbetter.tv. If you have a question you'd like to hear us answer or a topic you'd like us to discuss, please drop us a line on our website at coachbetter.tv/ask. Join our Coach Better Facebook group or find us on social media at Eduro Learning and send me a DM. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch all of our latest content here on YouTube. Today's video is a highlight from one of my favorite episodes from a previous season. If you're a longtime Coach Better listener, you know that I often reference Laura Lipton's work, particularly the continuum of practice for instructional coaches. Since we're focusing on coaches as leaders right now, I want to share this clip where Laura talks about the big picture of what makes coaching work from a school-wide perspective. When you're working on building a coaching culture and a coaching program, you know that you need systems and structures in place to make it sustainable. In this clip, Laura identifies 3 elements to your coaching culture that you may want to examine, so you can both measure the impact you're making right now and define the systems and structures needed to continue to grow. If this is something you're curious about, I know you're going to find Laura's advice really helpful. And if you want to make sure coaching is sustainable in your school setting, you need to watch our new workshop for experienced coaches, Scaling Your Impact as an Instructional Coach. You can find it at edurolearning.com/scale. And I'll tell you more about it, as well as another great opportunity for you to grow and leverage your leadership as an instructional coach at the end of the episode. All right, let's jump in. I think another struggle in this whole situation is that sometimes, and this is maybe particular to international schools, I can't speak as much about like US public schools, but certainly in international schools, what often will happen is one school hires coaches and the other school sees that happen, sees that that's happening and says, we want to hire coaches, but they don't have a clear vision for what coaching is or what coaching should be. So then even the school leader also sees the coach in maybe a role of more of a consultant or someone who can be pulled to do subcover or moderation of exams. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I sure do.
So yes. In all of your experience with so many different schools, so many different coaches, so many different leaders, how can coaches help their school leaders understand the value and purpose of coaching? How can they articulate that to their school leaders so that they can get in this more meaningful work that we're talking about here?
It's a good question. It's sort of a bundled question. I think I'm going to deconstruct it a little bit because one of the issues is talking about having a unified vision. So it's almost like, first of all, it's not just international schools. Let me say that. And I've worked lots and lots with international schools as well as North American public schools. And so what you're describing is sort of siloing the different roles. Like, here's your job, and here's my job, and here's this one's job. And there's coaches, and there's teachers on special assignment, teacher consultants. There's even in the title, there's sort of a connotation of what the expectation is. And so part of it is that from minimally a building level, ideally a full board or district level or organization, that there is a vision of learning and growth that is developmental for everybody in that school, in that organization, kids, adults alike, in every role. And so anytime that there is someone is called upon to engage in whatever role, that it is about that it's always calibrated to what's going to produce the most growth. How is this going to be a contribution to creating learning in our organization? Not just how am I going to fix it? Because so often what we do is we fix what's showing, not what's broken. and so it's this surface treatment. And so, and that's true in the role of coaches. Well, it's sort of a checklist of, well, the research says, so we did that one and we did that one and we did that one and we got coaches, and then we switched them to they were content coaches, but now they're just generalized coaches, but now they're whatever they are. So it's really that the definition of the way the individual functions, whatever their title, is congruent with a vision of growth and learning. And then everything follows, everything ideally should follow from that. So that if I'm a coach and I'm talking with my principal wants me to, well, occasionally, yes, please help us out by covering this class or by doing whatever. And that happens very frequently. I call it the doors and windows coaches, the floors and windows coaches, do everything. But, at some point, there needs to be a conversation about how are these tasks fulfilling the greater goal of supporting student learning and of supporting adult learning and of creating an organization that always has a developmental mindset, or as Carol Dweck would say, a growth mindset. So I think that just more directly, how would a coach advocate for themselves? I think they would advocate, it would be having the conversation about expectations. Here are some of mine, what are some of yours, and how does that fit with where we're all going together down this journey?
And I think that is probably the most fascinating part, because so many coaches that I work with talk about being hired for a position and then being like shocked that the principal doesn't have expectations that they have. And my first question always is, have you told them what your expectations for the role is? And they're like, no, they haven't told me. And I'm like, that's probably because they don't know. That's okay. That's going to be part of your job. You're going to go in and you're going to say, this is what I think I should be doing. Here's why I need to be doing it. These are the ways that you can support me. How does that align with your vision for this role or not? And then let's figure it out. But I think maybe because so many people move into this role or into a new school from being a teacher, there is that little bit of power difference that it feels uncomfortable and scary, maybe, to be the one who might know more about your job than the person that hired you, who may not even have been the person that hired you, given the context. So I think that expectations and being really clear about that, and then outlining that vision in collaboration with your school leader, I don't know how else you can really
Exactly. And so I think one of the best things that you can do as a director of coach programs, and having the influence that you might have, and this is for others who might be listening, is to support the coaches in how to have that conversation. Literally rehearse how to have that conversation, because it is a critical one. And the other critical one is having the same kind of a conversation with the people who they're coaching. Because it's the same, it's very similar. I won't say it's the same thing, but it's very similar. I don't know what to expect. You're a nice person, you brought brownies, I'll come to the meeting, but I'm dragging my feet because I have 700 other things that compete with my time with you. So let's have a conversation about how that time is valuable and valued, and then stick with it.
So much yes. And so much yes to that as being like clear for the whole school. I was talking to the coaching team from Nido, who will also be on the school in Chile called Nido de Aguilas in Santiago, Chile. And they've built their coaching program over the last 5 or 6 years. And they were talking about how they hold their program like a baby in their arms, and they're so careful with it. And I think that clear outlining of expectations, what I can offer, what you can expect, and why that's going to be consistent to the teachers and the leaders and anyone else you work with is so important, because just like you say, teachers have a million competing interests for their time. Yes, it's nice when you get some brownies, but like, what am I really going to get out of this? And how do I know I'm going to get something out of it every time we meet?
Exactly right. And you said something also really important I want to kind of underscore, which is, to what degree does this align with the greater vision? Because it's not personal. It's not my idea and your idea. It's the idea of what we want this place to be.
So all of that leads perfectly into another question, which I think we've already kind of jumped on a bunch of these issues in the answering that question. So I'm going to try to summarize a little bit. My next question is, what makes coaching work well? In all of your work around with many different schools in many different contexts, how can we make it work well? And I think we've talked about like really clearly articulating the vision and making sure that vision is aligned to growth for all stakeholders, and then being clear about expectations, both I guess above the coach to the school leader, and then with your coachees at your level as a coach. That's just the three things we talked about in the last question. What else makes coaching work well, or what needs to change about those three summary points that I made that makes coaching work in your experience?
I think that I think it's useful to separate the active coaching, the interactive, one-to-one, reciprocal, respectful conversation and relationship with the coaching program, right? So what makes a coaching? So are you? I would love to answer what makes coaching work well. Not understanding that's notwithstanding that you need to also, there are also ways to think about what makes a good coaching program, and just a couple of things that there's a good allotment of time, that it's modeled respectfully by anyone who's talking about it. It's not like the principal, you're going to see your coach. Sometimes coaches are looked at, go fix this, so the program has clear expectations. Those expectations are congruent and they're modeled in any way that anyone talks about coaching. There's a reasonable allotment of time. And there's actually one more thing I was thinking about, and it'll come back, I'm sure. Oh, yes, that there's standards, that there's some way to measure to what degree is this really getting us what we want it to get us. And so there's a standards base for effective coaching. And that coaches have an opportunity to network so that there's continuous improvement. So that's a programmatic kind of a thing. How much PD they get and all that kind of stuff, scheduling, the logistics, and so on. The act of coaching itself, what makes it work is identity, I think. That the coach's identity, and I'll use the term again as a growth agent, that's not tossed around casually. Oftentimes in the literature, you hear the notion of leaders, and I think coaches are certainly school leaders, that you hear the notion of leadership as a change agent. And change has a remedial connotation, because how you're doing that? There's a better way to do it. There's a different way to do it, which suggests that the way you're doing it is not good enough. And so a growth agent is more developmental. It says how you're doing it is how you're doing it. Let's take a look at that and let's see what to aspire to. And there's always continuous places to go to get better and better, to transfer new learning, to improve our practice, and so on. So there's a much more developmental mindset. And so the first and foremost is that I embrace that, because I think there are people who go into coaching, I think, as you said earlier, unintentionally, that think their job is to fix and look for sometimes problems in practice. So, part of it is just to look for, first of all, calibrate with a standard. So it's not cardiac assessment. In my heart, I know you did a good job or not. But also that I'm looking to support and stretch, not to fix, not to correct. And right there, that's a big bundle that is critically important for coaching to be successful, for a coach to be successful, for a coaching program to be successful. And then doing everything that would be congruent with that, first and foremost, really listening to being more curious than judgmental. So that when I catch myself judging, I say, I wonder. I learned something a million years ago from a woman named Judith Warren Little. She did some early work at the University of Colorado on collaborative teams. And she named something, she called it the most generous interpretation. And she said, when somebody does something that I think I can't even imagine why they would do that. I think it's really bizarre. I say to myself, what would be the most generous interpretation of that behavior? Why is that person making that choice at this time? Instead of dinging them, I get curious. And I decided if I'm gonna make up a reason without any data, I mean, the best thing to do would be to ask the person, so what's on your mind as you're doing this? But if I can't do that, I can make up a good reason, a generous interpretation. So I think that having that, and we've turned that into, as you know, in our model, positive presupposition. So really embracing positive presuppositions, listening non-judgmentally, being learning focused, are all the things that, again, that we can cultivate as habits and not beat ourselves up if we're not doing it, but continue to strive to do it.
Those were so beautiful. You said so much in that whole section, and I really appreciate the couple little tidbits I'm going to pull out. I appreciate the summary of what makes a coaching program work. That was awesome. Then when you're talking about identity and talking about being a growth agent, like a subset of that is the language we use when we talk about our coaching. And I know you were talking about identity, but that just made me think, oh, there's a whole separate piece here about the words we choose and the impact of those words and the baggage people carry with, like when you say the word change has that remedial kind of context to it, the baggage that people carry with language. So even thinking about coaching work, not just from the identity perspective, but from the choice of words that you use. That really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And I always love the positives, presuppositions in general. But what I thought was really great about that is a lot of times when I'm working with coaches and they're struggling for whatever reason to have a successful conversation, whatever's not going right, my first question always is, could you just approach it with curiosity? Whatever is happening, take everything else out of your brain and just be curious. And it might mean that you're asking a lot more informational questions, but maybe you need to ask more informational questions because you're hearing something and internalizing it maybe in a way that they don't intend it. And I think that listen with the most generous interpretation, but that idea of like being really like, why is this happening? Genuine curiosity. It's such a small mind shift, but it's something that makes a big impact.
Absolutely. And I think there's another piece in the middle of that, which is the use of paraphrase. I mean, as simple as that is, and I'm not talking about the parrot phrase, what I think I hear you saying is, but sometimes offering what you're understanding and saying it, you get a confirmation or a correction. And that gets you much further in the conversation because, as you said, it may be that you're not really understanding what somebody's saying. And so you could drill down with inquiry. You could also offer a paraphrase and then get corrected. And then your colleague is more in control. It's their world. You're visiting their world, basically.
And I know that everyone says this, but I still was thinking while you were talking, but isn't it amazing when you paraphrase in whatever way that you do it? If you get it wrong, there's no hesitation to correct. And so I know it's like an overused thing to talk about paraphrasing, but I don't think it is because that is where you get at a shared understanding instead of, that kind of your view, their view. We have the same view.
I want to put a tiny little advocacy piece for paraphrase. Paraphrase is an enormous relational gift because if I paraphrase what you said, what I'm actually, the message that I'm authentically sending is, I care about I understand what you're saying, or I really want to, which means I care about understanding, which means I care about you. It's a message of regard. The paraphrase is a message of regard, and it increases the efficiency of the conversation.
Hi, coaches. I hope you enjoyed this clip from my conversation with Laura. I especially appreciate the ways that Laura brought together both the art and practice of coaching and the systems and structures that make a coaching program successful. When you're thinking about measuring the impact you make and identifying ways that your program can continue to grow, it's essential to reflect on all three layers that Laura highlights: the coaching program, meaning the systems and structures, your coaching practice, meaning the art of coaching, and the coach, you, the human doing the work. These complex dynamics are all essential in making coaching successful and sustainable in your school community. This episode is a great starting point in better understanding what is needed to truly grow a coaching program and culture. But we have more for you. My brand new workshop, Scaling Your Impact as an Instructional Coach, digs into the specific systems and structures that need to be in place for instructional coaching to be sustainable, including understanding these 3 dynamics so you can advocate for the work of coaches with your senior leadership team. This workshop will also give you a preview to our newest online course for experienced coaches, Coaches as Leaders. So if you're an experienced instructional coach and you are ready to start thinking about these big picture systemic structures so you can make your coaching program more sustainable, watch the workshop now at edurolearning.com/scale. And if you discover that you need support as you go through the process, join us for the first global cohort of Coaches as Leaders, designed for experienced coaches ready to advocate for and build the systems and structures that are needed to truly sustain a coaching culture. In Coaches as Leaders, we'll help you recognize exactly which systems and structures you need and might be missing in your school setting so you can make your coaching culture sustainable, both for you as an individual coach and for your school. Registration opens only once a year. Get all the details at edurolearning.com/CAL. If you're curious right now and you have questions, please reach out. You can leave a comment below, you can join our Coach Better Facebook group, or you can find us on social media and send me a DM. I'd love to support you on your coaching journey. See you next time.